I had originally planned to make one big video on Japanese cyberpunk as a part 2 to my Cyberpunk series, but there is just too much to condense, so instead I will make this an ongoing series by focusing on specific examples. Before I go on, there are some things you should know in order to understand Japanese cyberpunk. Here in the West, police and authority are generally seen as corrupt in some form or another. In contrast, Japan has a very different stance on police relations with the public. That punk moniker calls back to the early days of the punk rock movement, and police were almost always seen as an imposing factor. Hell, in today's climate, I wouldn't be surprised to see this explored in more modern cyberpunk. In Japan though, the different culture, the different environment, they aren't running into the same constant police issues. But let's go back. At least in the 80s, Japanese cyberpunk had a major focus on police or some sort of task force. That theme is seen well into the 90s, 2000s, even as late as 2019, with the release of the dystopian cyberpunk video game Astral. The idea of police in Japan is seen as one that should be, well, helping the people. Sounds kind of funny to some Western audiences, but according to this interview by Polygon with Astral director Takahisa, that's just how it goes in Japan. In the United States, playing as a police officer in a video game is complicated. Our country deals with police brutality and police shootings. I recognize in Japan that the police are very different. Can you tell me what the perception of the police is in Japan, and how a Japanese audience responds to playing as the police? Let's see. Well, I don't think there's people within Japan who have an extreme view on the police department. Through this game, we want to give the police the image of being a hero. You can't do things in this game like hurt people. We want to have the player feel like they're being heroic as they progress through the game. So, you got all of that? Now, let's take that focus and look back at the late 80s, early 90s manga and OVA series Angel Cop. Is a bit of a forgotten example, but rather notorious for its unintentionally funny dubbing and rather controversial subject matter.
Fuck you, baby! Ah! Oh!
We are all used to seeing hacking and computers in our Western cyberpunk favorites. A lot of early Japanese cyberpunk barely has any of that, instead focusing on cybernetics with the likes of cyborg characters and awesome futuristic gadgets and weapons. Don't forget that motto, high tech, low life. Something like Angel Cop fits that, despite not having any hacking or Matrix world to explore. It doesn't have a very dystopian-like city, quite the opposite. And, well, everyone is seemingly corrupt, though. Our protagonist is Angel.
Let me introduce myself. The name's Angel, but don't let that fool you. I can be a bitch when I want to.
A badass with a sweet bike and a cool gun. She isn't your typical anime heroine either. She isn't exploited for sexuality. Instead, she'll just blast some heads off and create a rather interesting combo of swears.
Fuck and piss!
I'd say she's a memorable cyberpunk character, though I've seen a lot of negatives about her online saying that her attitude sucks.
Your attitude totally sucks. Anyway, see you tomorrow, ice bitch.
How the fuck with her anyway?
I don't know, it kinda helps with the type of character she is, but maybe something got lost in the translation. I've seen people say she's a ripoff visually of the Major from Ghost in the Shell, but both manga were released in the same year around the same time, so any form of plagiarism is seemingly impossible. Like I mentioned, it's a manga, though that was never translated into English, but also a 6-part OVA, that is, original video animation. And back in the 80s, These were top tier of anime filth. Mindless violence, nudity, and controversial subject matter. You barely see that anymore. Manga Entertainment brought most of these to the West, and the English dubs...
It's true what they say, smoking's bad for your health, especially when it's your own flesh you're smoking.
Alright, buttfucker.
What?
...are a thing of beauty. But some reason a lot of these early dubs had a lot of characters with thick New York accents.
I'll tell you for a fuck.
Hey, you cocksucker, don't use your filthy fucking talk with her! Watch your fucking mouth!
Hey, chill out, will you?
I understand that in terms of something like Madball 34, but Angel Cop is set in Japan. You have your key players, that's Angel, and Raiden. He's a bit like Angel in that he is sort of a special force agent.
You fucker! Try some of this!
And, well, I guess spoilers. Raiden gets injured and becomes a cyborg. Sounds familiar. So you have your special forces, and then you have your so-called terrorists, the Red May.
Shut the fuck up, you self-righteous, moralizing commie scumbag. You make me sick.
Then there's these hunters over here, Lucifer, Asura, and Freya. You see, Lucifer and these other two have kinetic powers.
Away from me, please keep away. My quarrel's not with you. I wish you no harm.
But you are guilty and must die!
What's that have to do with Cyberpunk? Not a whole lot. But it worked in Akira, so I guess they wanted to play with that theme here in Angel Cop. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So the special forces are assigned to take down radical terrorists. These aren't your typical police, though.
The regular Japanese police force are a bunch of pussies, but these special security agents are different.
These terrorists, the Red May, want to destroy Japan's economy. In this timeline, Japan is the #1 economy in the world. Everyone is seemingly out to get them. The mysterious hunters appear and battle the terrorists for their own reasons, but then battle the special forces. The real enemies here are the Tokyo government. They are in cahoots with the Jews. No, really, the original Japanese release had some pretty radical views and writing, with these Jewish Americans attempting to take over Japan, buying Hokkaido, dumping in all sorts of nuclear waste there. But this was all slightly altered in the English dubs, now to make Americans as a whole the evil forces. Not that that's any better, but at least it's not anti-Semitic. Later releases give a warning about this subject matter though, as they keep the original Japanese subs in it. I was curious to know where this extreme view came from. I don't even think that was even in the original manga, but rather added to the OVA directed by Ichiro Itano. But Itano is beloved by many people for his works on the likes of Gundam and Cowboy Bebop, the movie. Plus, you can't blame the animation team for just following the original script. Anyway, manga creator Tako Kitazaki is cleared, Ichiro Itano is cleared, so I don't know. Regardless, the story has been changed in the English dub release, and some could argue that that's changing art. But then, you could make the argument that something like Angel Cop isn't exactly art to begin with. It is funny to think that this was in the early 90s, and Manga Entertainment weren't exactly PC back then, yet the change was still made. Moving on, I do prefer the manga animation to the animated design. They just look cooler, I don't know. The stories are similar, but the manga seems to have Angel be the one that becomes RoboCop, which would make more sense. The Japanese landscape isn't as flashy as in other cyberpunk anime. The subject matter, though, like we touched upon before, is politically heavy, and that's a topic common in most cyberpunk stories. Police being used as pawns, even these hunters being used as pawns to further the ideals of the corrupt government in charge. Things like patriotism gets thrown out the window, law and order too. It's all about economic control. Those who have the money have the power. It's a rather bleak outlook at actual society. And of course, the action. Honestly, that's the main reason to watch Angel Cop. A lot of great kinetic for straight up technology power.
You've underestimated the power of Japanese technology, you evil bitch!
It's generally referred today as awful, terrible. People even criticize the animation. I don't really see much wrong with it. I think it looks great. And I always give major props to all those older, hand-drawn anime. This distinction of what anime is today obviously didn't exist back then. Early 90s to mid 90s anime that made the rounds pretty much all came from manga. They were what was readily available in the movie stores. Kids in 92 weren't going out and renting and buying the 100 plus tapes of Dragon Ball Z. They were watching the one-offs and short OVAs, which were generally these adult-oriented ones. Of course, life is all hindsight now. Anime is much more prevalent and widely available, obviously. Angel Cop fans know its place, and aren't saying it's better than something like Ghost in the Shell. It may be parts nostalgia that one would actually still enjoy Angel Cop. Watching Angel Cop today in the English dub makes for at least a fun viewing. It's definitely campy. It's no masterpiece. It was never trying to be either. It was purely just straight up action, borrowing cyberpunk elements to make it stick out a bit more. The soundtrack is great. It has that great 80s and early 90s vibe to it. The ending theme's catchy, although a bit repetitive. It's just one of many OVA that was available here in the West.
It's the booby trap on the second floor!
Shit, it'll be the cops.